Shalom, everybody. Welcome to this week's journey through Torah. We are in VaYigash, which means, and he drew near. There's some really important things we're going to see in this week's portion. We find all of the world is in a famine. Yosef had been sent to Mitzrayim and sold into slavery, but through, let's just say, circumstances, I don't believe it was circumstantial, Yahweh was ordaining things to happen in Yosef's life to put him in front of Pharaoh after he gave Pharaoh dreams that no one could interpret, and Yahweh told Yosef what the dreams meant. So Pharaoh puts him in a place of authority to put into plan what needed to happen so that Mitzrayim would not fall and so that the people could have what they would need, right? So we come to this point. Yosef's brothers had come before him, and they didn't recognize him. So now Yosef is like, I wonder what's going on with them. I wonder if my brother is still alive. I wonder if my father is still alive. I don't know what's going on, and I wonder if my brothers have changed. So he orchestrates things to happen that not only would they have to come back to him, because remember, he kept Shimon with them. So not only did he orchestrate so they would have to come back to him, he says, when you come back to me, you're going to bring Binyamin, you're going to bring your younger brother, and I want to make sure that you're telling me the truth. Ultimately, he wanted to make sure that they did not treat Binyamin the way they treated him, right? So they come before him, and he tells his brothers, okay, well, look, you guys can go on back home, but I'm going to keep Binyamin. And Yehuda says, you can't do that because I promised my father I would return his son to him. I promised my father, I promised Israel that I would bring Binyamin back to him. And what we start to see, starting to open up some things up prophetically in here, is we see that Yosef, we've already talked about Mashiach ben Yosef, and Mashiach ben David is a figure of a Messiah. One would be a suffering servant, but yet would be necessary for what was to come to pass. We know that Yosef was a suffering servant, but he rose to a place of prominence in the world and became ruler of the world at the time and be the one to give the bread that would give life to everyone. But then Mashiach ben David, also talking about a ruling, reigning Messiah that would come and set up the kingdom of Yahweh. I believe it's the same guy. I believe they both point to Yeshua here. But what we also start to see is that Binyamin is also a representation here of Yeshua. Binyamin was known by a few names. Son of my sorrows, by his mother, right? She died in childbirth right after she gave birth to him. She said this was the son of my sorrow. So he was one who was acquainted with sorrow, but his father renamed him Binyamin, the son of the right hand, which was son of promise, son of strength, son of covenant, all of this in there, right? So we have someone who was a son of sorrows, who was a son of promise and the right hand and strength. And again, these can point toward pictures of Yeshua as well. And we have them coming to Yosef. So we're starting to see a lot of things kind of filling in everywhere here, okay? So Yosef approaches, or Binyamin approaches Yosef and says, I can't let that happen. And so Yosef is overcome at this point. He causes everyone who's in the room there, because he had Egyptians there with him, right? He says, everyone in the room, leave them. So it was just him and his brothers alone. And he reveals himself. It's me, Yosef, and is my father still alive? And so there's this great, wonderful reunion, right? Well, not necessarily, because now his brothers are terrified. They don't know what's going to happen to them. They don't know if Yosef is going to take revenge on them, which he is perfectly capable of doing. And by many, he said, well, he has the right to do it too. But does he decide to take revenge? Does he decide to destroy his brothers? What happens here? No. Yosef tells him something interesting. He tells him to come closer. Come closer to me. And that's, again, a picture of what Yeshua is telling us to do as well. When we realize we're put in a situation where we are guilty of our trespasses, we are guilty of sin, we are guilty and Yeshua took on our sin, and we look at him and we're overcome with that. Yeshua tells us, instead of just dwelling in the guilt in these things, he tells us, come closer. Come closer. I did this so you could live. See? And that's something that we see in the story of Yosef. We start to have more things unfolding as we start to see a shepherd's heart in Yosef, which we knew he was a shepherd, right? And though he was the ruler of Mitzrayim, he is a shepherd. And so he's starting to show this. He by taking care of his family, taking care of the family's flocks and herds and all of these things. So he's revealing again his heart, and over and time again, we see throughout the scripture where the people to lead Israel were to be ones who had a shepherd's heart. When Yehoshua took place over Moshe, what did Moshe ask for? Essentially, he asked for someone who would be a good shepherd to Israel. And even Yeshua, when he came, which will kind of go full circle in this, Yeshua, when he came, he said he was the good shepherd. He is the good shepherd for us. He is the good shepherd for Israel. And so we start to see some more pictures here as well. So now what happens? So now his brothers go back and they talk to their father, and they're telling Israel, Dad, you're not going to believe this. Yosef is still alive. You know, they make this declaration, Od Yosef Chai. Joseph still lives. He is alive. Now, we know at this point where he doesn't really say specifically what happened to Joseph. You know, I mean, even though Dad may have his suspicions, we are not told that he says, oh, yeah, I know what you guys did to him. No, because remember, he thinks Joseph is dead. And so when they come back and they're like, Joseph still lives, how could this be? This is impossible. He's mourned his son for all this time, but how could this possibly be true? This can't be true because Joseph is dead. So you can see his reluctance here to believe what they're saying, but they convince him. So let's pick it up here. In Genesis 45:25, says, they went up from Egypt, and they came to the land of Canaan to Jacob their father, and they told him, Od Yosef Hai, Joseph is still alive, and he is the ruler over the whole land of Egypt. And his heart went numb because he did not believe them. But they told him all of Joseph's words that he had told them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to pick him up, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. Then Israel said, enough, my son Joseph is still alive. I must go and see him before I die. Interesting things he says here, because it says that when Jacob saw these things and did this, his spirit was revived. And in the very next verse, it calls him Israel. Israel said, enough, let's go get Joseph. Okay, so again, we're starting to see pictures of gathering and putting the whole house back together. Though some were in exile, we see this exile and restoration throughout the Torah and the Tanakh. Okay, so they're telling Dad the words that Joseph had said to them, and I wonder what exactly the words were. I wonder what words they said, because there's some interesting things that Joseph said to his brothers that I don't think they would have told Dad. So what did they tell him? You know, what was being said here? You know, some of the story is probably not disclosed. However, Joseph, in talking to his brothers, does not focus on how he came to be in Mitzrayim. He came to terms with this fact and this idea that it was Yahweh who sent me here ahead of you. Yahweh did all this in my life so that you would be preserved. Can you imagine? Yosef was in this place in his life where he thought his brothers had sold him into slavery, not uncertain of life, you know, sure doom, who knows what's going to happen, and falsely accused, thrown in prison, and all of this going on. And now Joseph is saying, no, Yahweh did all this in my life so that I would come to this position and this point so that I could save you, who sold me into slavery, who did all these things. See, Yosef had to come to a point where he had to be able to let these things go and forgive his brothers and to learn to deal good with them, to save them, their families, and their father. Okay? So what happens here? What does Joseph say? Genesis 45, verses 4 through 11. He says, "Come near to me, please." And they came there, and he said, "Ani Yosef, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. So now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life." That's quite a statement for him to be able to say that. Okay, because literally what he says here is Lemichya shelachni Elohim lifnehem. It was Yahweh who sent me here before you, ahead of you. So it's like he's now saying, I know that I was sent here at the time I was sent here so that these things would happen, so that when you got here, I would be here waiting for you. And I would be in the position to help you. Again, consider what was going on with Yosef and how all this came to be. It's an amazing story. But he says literally, to preserve life, I was sent Elohim before you. So Yahweh may ordain circumstances in your life. He may give us things to do that might not be easy, but the outcome can be something glorious. The outcome can be something that's necessitated. I mean, it can be something that we absolutely need to happen, but we can't see it in the midst of it. It could be very much like what Mordecai said to Esther. Who knows, but that you were put into this position that you were in for such a time as this. You know, when their life was being threatened and when all this was happening, she was the only one. She was the only hope. She was the only one that could go in before the king and plead their cause. And maybe, just maybe, it was Yahweh who put her in the situation to be taken away from her family and taken away from the things that she knew in the life that she had, to be put in this situation. See, we don't know, but again, in all things, we need to be faithful and continue to look for what the Father has. He continues to say in Genesis 45:7, God sent me before you to give you a remnant on the earth and to save you alive for a great deliverance. It's interesting phrasing. He said that God sent me before you to give you a remnant. What does that mean? Well, remember, the famine was very severe in the land, and many people, I'm sure, lost their lives. But Yosef was the one who had the bread that could give life, okay? Remnant just simply means that which remains, something that was a part of a whole, something that was part of something else, okay? It's something that's residual, something that has been escaped or something that was left behind. So he says that Yahweh sent me here to give you a remnant so that you could be delivered and remain in the famine, because there's a famine there, but he can sustain you in that. All right, let's look at Isaiah 11, verses 10 through 13. On that day, the root of Jesse, which stands as a banner for the people, the nations will seek him out, and the place where he rests will be glorious. We know, speaking of Yeshua, right? And on that day, Adonai will raise his hand again, a second time, to reclaim the remnant of his people who remain from Ashur, Egypt, Patros, Ethiopia, Elam, Shinar, Hamat, and the islands in the sea. And he will hoist a banner for the Goyim. He will hoist a banner for the nations. He will assemble the dispersed of Israel, gather the scattered of Yehuda from the four corners of the earth. Ephraim's jealousy will cease. Those who harass Yehuda will be cut off. Ephraim will stop envying Yehuda, and Yehuda will stop provoking Ephraim. And again, so we have this remnant that will all be gathered into, this is a picture of Yeshua. So this is he have a purpose. This is what he was doing. Yeshua came so that a remnant of the earth, a remnant that is in there, will come to him and have life, and he will sustain them. And he says, he put me here so that you would have a remnant and that there would be a great deliverance. Well, remember, the famine was severe. So this is a great deliverance, something that's there. And that is the word that's used there, plita, which means an escaped remnant. A remnant that comes through it. Okay, a remnant that passes through. So more things on the idea of a remnant. Isaiah 37:31 says, meanwhile, the remnant of the house of Yehuda that has escaped will again take root downward and bear fruit upward. Obadiah 1:17 says, but on Mount Zion there will be a holy remnant who will escape, and the house of Yaakov will repossess their rightful inheritance. Ezekiel 14:22 says there will still be left a remnant in it to be brought out, including both sons and daughters when they come out to you, and you see their way of life and how they act, and you will be consoled over the calamity I have brought upon Jerusalem and over everything I have done to it. So again, Yosef is saying he put me here, Yahweh put me here so there would be a remnant that could be delivered. And what does he tell them to do? Go back home, gather the family up, get dad, and come back here so that I can sustain you. Come be with me so that I can provide for you, protect you, and give you the life that you need that you cannot have outside of me. Okay, Genesis, back in again, Genesis 45, 4 through 11, let's go to verse 6. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing or harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep you alive for you many survivors. Again, this deliverance. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt. So hurry and go up to my father and say to him, so this is what Yosef says, right? Thus says your son Yosef, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, and you and your children and your children's children, and your flocks and your herds and all that you have. There I will provide for you, for there are yet 5 years of famine to come. So you and your household and all that you have do not come to poverty. So Yosef is saying, come to me. I'll put you in this land over here in Goshen, and I will make sure you are taken care of and you have what you need because there is a famine in the land and you're not going to be able to provide for yourself out in the world. So come to me and I will give you everything that you need because I have the power and the authority and the willingness to do it. Again, we're starting to see some other pictures here in the back of your mind when you're reading the story of Yosef. You can't help but think about Yeshua in the midst of these. Okay, so now this is what Yosef tells his brothers, but then we read a little further on that Pharaoh heard about Joseph's brothers coming, and he was told Joseph's brothers are here, and so Pharaoh actually is excited, and then Pharaoh talks to Yosef. And so now what happens here? Does he tell him, I don't want your brothers coming here? No, he actually encourages them. No, go get your family and bring them here, right? We read in Genesis 45, 17 to 21, Pharaoh says to Yosef, say to your brothers, do this, load your animals, go to the land of Canaan, and then get your father, your households, and come to me. I'll give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you will eat the fat of the land. You are also commanded to say, do this, take for yourselves wagons from the land of Egypt for your children and for your wives, and to pick up your father and come. Don't be concerned about your goods, because the best of the land of Egypt is yours. So the sons of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them carts by Pharaoh's command, and he gave them provisions for the journey. So he gave them carts, he gave them provisions, gave them what they needed to get there and to get everyone and bring them back. He even gave them some money, and he gave them some changes of clothes, which I find interesting. What kind of clothes did he give them? You think he would have gave them Hebrew clothes? No, he would have gave them Egyptian clothes, because Pharaoh is doing this. He would have given them Egyptian clothes as kind of like, oh, come, great, yeah, here, wear these. Think about that for a minute. So Pharaoh was like, yes, come to me and come out in this and come all, but I don't want you to look Hebrew. I want you to look like the rest of us. Again, when they brought Yosef in front of Pharaoh, what did he do? They changed his identity. Even though Pharaoh was told this is a Hebrew, they changed his identity when they brought him before him. Again, it's another little thing that we read in here that we start to see the rest of the story here, where Israel, they went to Mitzrayim, they prospered in the land, they became many people, but they kind of forgot Yahweh in the midst of it. And then that leads us into the next book, which we're not getting into today, right? So in Genesis 45:24, Yosef sends his brothers away, he sends them back, and then he tells them something interesting. He tells them, so on your way back to go get the family, go get everyone, don't be fighting with yourselves. Do not quarrel along the way. Why would they be fighting with each other? This should be a joyous occasion, right? I mean, they're going to be saved. They're going to have food. They're going to have land. They're going to have everything that they need. They're not going to have to worry about anything for, at least these 5 years. I don't know if the plan was to come here for the 5 years that remain and then go back, but regardless, they know that they're going to be taken care of, right? Why would they be arguing? Well, I mean, I told you not to throw them in the pit. I told you not to sell them. I told you not to do this, and fighting and arguing over all this. But missing the point, they're still scared. They still don't know if Joseph is going to try to retaliate or not. Can you imagine? Joseph is trying to bless them and he's trying to tell them, don't worry about it. Essentially, I forgive you. You didn't do this to me. Yahweh did this to me. How can I be mad at you for Yahweh ordaining the things to put me in this position? Right? And they're still waiting for the anger. They're still waiting for retribution. They're still waiting for this. And so they're kind of like to point blame at one another. Who's it really fault? Who's going to catch wrath? Joseph is telling them, don't be like that. Don't argue with one another. Don't worry about placing blame. Don't worry about doing all these things. Just go get dad and your families and bring them back. Okay. In James 4, 1-3, we see issues of quarreling and unity. It says, what causes quarrels and fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and you do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. And you ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. Again, what is our desire and how do we live according to them? See, that does affect our life, even on a daily basis, right? We can live a life full of strife and quarrel and envy and jealousy and all that, or we can choose to live in peace, love, joy. Again, it all comes down to where our focus is and the way that we choose to focus on the issues and the things in our life. Proverbs 17:14 says that the beginning of strife is like letting out of water, so quit before the quarrel breaks out. Proverbs 20 verse 3 says, avoiding quarrels brings a person honor, for any fool can explode in anger. Proverbs 22:10 says, drive out a scoffer and strife will go out, and quarreling and abuse will cease. Proverbs 26:20 says, for lack of wood the fire goes out, and where there is no whisperer, quarreling ceases. If you don't have anybody feeding the flame, it's not going to grow. So again, where you direct your thoughts, your intent, your heart, your desires, your passions, that's what's going to grow in your life. That's what's going to solidify, and that whichever you feed. It's Paul puts it this way: whatever you dedicate yourself to, you become a servant of, whether to sin or to righteousness. You can be a slave to sin, or you can be a slave to righteousness. That which you give yourself to, you serve. Okay, and so how do we do with our actions within our own hearts and in relationships and dealing with things with one another? Even Yeshua and his disciples dealt with the same kind of thing, right? Mark 9:33-35 says that so they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, so what were you guys discussing along the way? I find it funny the way it says this, because it says they kept silent because along the way they were arguing with one another about who was the greatest. And he sat down and he called the 12 and he said to them, if anyone would be first, he must be the last and the servant of all. So they're arguing with each other while they're walking along the way. And once they get there, Yeshua's like, so what were you guys talking about back there? And they kept quiet because it's like, busted, right? And Yeshua reminds them, you want to be great? Then if you want to be great, you're going to be a servant. And put it this way as well. You're going to be a shepherd. You're going to have the heart to look out for one another. You're going to have the heart to help feed the people and to help make sure that the people have what they need so that they can live life and be what they're supposed to be here in the earth. So everything happens. They finally convince Dad Yosef is alive. And so now Israel is so excited to go see Yosef that he jumps in the wagon, packs up his stuff, and he goes straight to, where do you think? Straight to Mitzrayim? No, he goes straight to Beersheba. Why in the world would he go to Beersheba and stop there when he wants to go to Mitzrayim and see his son? He says, Yosef is alive and I have to go see him before I die, because he's an old man, right? So he's like, I got to go see him before I die. I've got to go see Joseph. And so he goes down to Beersheba. Why? To get the answer here, we gotta look back. So we see in Genesis 46 what we're looking at. Israel set out with everything belonged to him, and then he came to Beersheba and he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. Even in here, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father, Isaac. So again, there's relationship that's happening here. It's not just to Yahweh, but to the God of his father, the God of Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. Again, we see this connection to go take a look at what was happening with Isaac in relationship to why he was making this offering here. Okay, so what's the connection with Yitzhak and Beersheba? To get the answer to that, we go back to Genesis 26. Verses 1 through 5 says, there was a famine in the land. See that? Aside from the previous famine that happened in Avram's days. So Yitzhak went to King Abimelech of the Philistines to Gerar. And then Adonai appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land about which I tell you. Live as an outsider in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and to your seed I give all these lands, and I will confirm my pledge to you that I swore to Avram your father. I will multiply your seed like the stars of the sky, and I will give your seed all the lands, and in your seed all the nations of the earth will continually be blessed. Because Abraham listened to my voice, kept my charge, my mitzvot, my decrees, and my instructions. See, now what we have here is Yitzhak, there was a famine in the land, and he was going to go down to Mitzrayim, and Yahweh says, don't. I want you to stay in the land where I put you right here, live as an outsider here. I will take care of you in the land here. So you can see at the back of Yaakov's mind, in the back of his mind, he could be thinking, yeah, but see, I want to go see Joseph, and I want to go down here, and I'm excited to do this because I want to see my son, but what if Yahweh doesn't want me to go down there? See, so now he's kind of, what do? I have to make this choice. And so he goes to Beersheba, and he goes to make an offering to Yahweh in this place. And I'm saying he's calling out on him in prayer, saying, can I do this? Because you told my father not to do this. Is it okay that I'm doing this? And what does Yahweh tell him? Okay, so we go forward in verse 23. So he went up from there to Beersheba, and Adonai appeared to him that night and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you, and I will bless you and multiply your seed for the sake of Abraham, my servant. So he built there an altar, and he called on the name of Adonai, and he pitched his tent there, and Yitzhak's servants hollowed out a well there. So Yitzhak, he was like, okay, what does he do? So Yahweh says, I'm going to take care of you, and that's what's reconfirmed here. Don't go down there. I'm going to take care of you where I have you. All right. So he goes to Beersheba, and this is where he was told, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to take care of you. Don't worry about this. I will fulfill the promise I gave to Abraham in you. All right. So now we go back to Israel. Okay. We have Abraham, Yitzhak. Now we go back to Israel, Yaakov here. So he goes out and he sets along. He goes to Beersheba. He makes the sacrifices to the God of his father, Yitzhak. Then in verse 2, in the visions of the night, God said to Israel, Yaakov, Yaakov. And Nani, he says, here I am. He says, I am the God of your father, he said. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will turn you into a great nation there. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I myself will also most certainly bring you up. And Joseph will put his hands on your eyes. So then Jacob arose from Beersheba, and Israel's sons carried Jacob their father, and their little children, and their wives, and their carts that Pharaoh had sent to carry him. So this might seem a little confusing here, because it's like, wait a minute, he told Isaac not to do it, now he's telling Jacob that he can, and it's essentially the same thing, right? This might seem a little confusing at first, but there was a purpose happening here. So, because the timing of all this was important as well. Okay, why was he going down there? Because all of this was happening, and Yahweh was reminding. I mean, when Yitzhak called on him, he said, "The God of Abraham, your father, I made promises to Abraham, I made promises to you. Here's what's going on. This is what I want you to do." So when Yaakov calls on him, he says, "Yes, I am the God of your fathers, Abraham and Yitzhak. Yes, and I. This is what I want you to do." Okay, and he says, "Don't worry about this. Do not be in fear. This is what's going to happen." Okay, so now what happens to Abraham? Well, this didn't catch Yahweh by surprise. All right, because remember the promise he gave to him in Genesis 15:13. He says to Avram, know for certain, your seed will be strangers in a land that is not theirs. They will be enslaved and oppressed 400 years. But I'm going to judge that nation and that they serve, and afterward they will go out with many possessions. But you will come to your fathers in peace, and you'll be buried at a good old age. Then the fourth generation, they will return here. So Yahweh was speaking to Avram and told him, your descendants are going to go to a nation that's not theirs. They will be oppressed there, but there they will become a great people, and I will bring them out, and I will judge the nation that oppresses them. Okay? And we see this when that's what happened. Israel went to Mitzrayim. They became a great people. They became oppressed, and they cried out to Yahweh. And then Moshe now enters the picture. We see in Exodus 3, 7, 9, at the burning bush, Adonai says, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry because of their slave masters, for I know their pains. And I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, to bring them up out of that land to a good and large land, a land flowing with milk and honey, into the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. Now behold, the cry of Bnei Israel has come to me. Moreover, I have seen the oppression that the Egyptians have afflicted on them. Does any of this catch Yahweh by surprise? No. He told Abraham this was going to happen. And guess what? It's going to happen. Yosef was a key figure in drawing Israel into this point, but ultimately they're in exile. Okay, they're not in the land. They're in exile. But it's in exile they became, Israel became a large group of people and became the sons of Israel with their families and tribes. But yet it is in exile they will be called back to the land, and they will go back, and before they get there, they receive the Torah of Yahweh, and they go into the land and walk in the promise that Yahweh told them about. Okay, so now we go back to Yosef. So Yosef is the ruler of Mitzrayim, but we still see the shepherd's heart through Yosef. Yosef is still providing for his family. Yosef is still providing for the flocks. We see in Genesis 45:11, he says, I'll provide food for you there because the famine's not done yet. The famine's going to be another 5 years. Okay. So come to me and I will take care of you, and I will make sure that you, your families, your children, your livestock, you're going to have everything that you need. But the problem is the people of Mitzrayim don't like shepherds. The shepherds are abhorrent to the people of Mitzrayim. So what's going to happen now? Okay, well, let's look in Genesis 46, 31 to 34. So then Yosef said to his brothers and to his father's household, I'll go up and tell Pharaoh and say to him, my brothers and my father's household who are in the land of Canaan have come to me, and the men are shepherds, for they've been men who handle livestock and who have brought their flocks and cattle and everything that they possess. So when Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? You must say, your servants have been men who handle livestock since the time of our youth until now, both we and our fathers, so that you can live in the land of Goshen, because every shepherd is loathsome to the Egyptians. Okay, here's something interesting. Unclean animals really don't like being shepherded. Okay, and even clean animals will fight it. All right, but unclean animals, they won't just fight being shepherded, they will turn and attack you. Try shepherding wolves. Big difference from sheep, huh? So it's something that we start to see a picture here as well. Though the shepherd who's trying to protect his flock, and here he's in Mitzrayim trying to protect his flock, and what happens? They become large. They start to grow, and he is giving this. So what is the biblical model for a shepherd? Biblical model of a shepherd is something simply someone who cares for and feeds the flock that is entrusted to him. He cares for and feeds the flock that is entrusted to him. This means safe places to stay. This means protection from the elements. This means protection from things that would seek to harm them, and to make sure they have food and water, right? And all of this is, we're seeing examples and the importance of caring for the flock of Yahweh. And again, we see pictures of Yosef as a shepherd, even though he is a ruler in the tribe. Genesis 48:15, we have, again, Israel blessing, and he said, he blessed Yosef, and he said, the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Yitzhak walked, the God who has shepherded me throughout my life to this day. Okay? Israel is saying, Yahweh shepherded me. He took care of me as his sheep. And we have this picture of we are sheep. And today, sheep is a derogatory term, right? People, sheeple, right? Sheep. But guys, we're supposed to be sheep. The problem is, are we listening to the right shepherd? Are we listening to the right voice? Yeshua said, my sheep hear my voice, right? Are we listening to the right voice? Are we following the right voice? We're supposed to be sheep, but we're supposed to submit to the good shepherd. Psalm 23, even David, Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. Isaiah 40, verse 11, like a shepherd, he tends his flock. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them in his bosom, and he gently guides nursing ewes. 2 Samuel 5, 1 and 2, all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron. Interesting there, Hebron. We talked about that last week. He came to Hebron and he spoke, saying, here we are, your own flesh and blood. Even before, when Saul was king over us, it was you who led Israel out and back. And also Adonai said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel and be ruler over Israel. In Jeremiah 3, 14 and 15, it says, return, O backsliding children, declares Adonai, for I am your husband. I will choose you, one from a city, two from a clan, and I will bring you to Zion, and I will give you shepherds after my own heart, who will feed you with knowledge and understanding. Again, we have a picture of good shepherds. Not just the one good shepherd, but good shepherds as well, okay? You can have bad shepherds, you can have good shepherds, but regardless, we need shepherds, right? When Yosef was sent by Israel to his brothers, they were supposed to be shepherding the sheep in Shechem. Remember that? In Genesis 37, 13 and 14, Israel says to Yosef, aren't your brothers grazing the flocks in Shechem? So he says, go and check on the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the flocks and bring word back to me. And he sent them from the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Now, as you continue to read in the story, you'll find his brothers were not there at Shechem. They were not where they were supposed to be, which is important because what's the significance of Shechem? Shechem is, in essence, the valley of decision. You have Mount Aval and Mount Gerizim that is there. When Yahweh brings Israel back into the land, he says, when you go in there, you are to put and establish, you are to put the covenant in place before you. There in Shechem, at Mount Gerizim and Mount Aval, you were to take half the tribes and place them towards Gerizim, half the tribes and place them toward Aval, and then you are to declare the blessings and the cursings of the covenant, and all the people were to respond, Amen. We have the Levi'im that was in Shechem declaring the word of Yahweh. So again, they are establishing this place of setting before you today life and death, blessing and cursing. Choose life. This is where the shepherds were supposed to have the sheep, to put them in a place, a reminder of covenant, to look to Gerizim, look at the blessings, look at the life, look at what's growing there, look at the wells, look at the water, look at what Yahweh is giving us there, and that's where we're supposed to dwell, to dwell on the good that he is giving. The brothers didn't have them at Shechem. They went to Dothan, right? Dothan means two wells. So they went to Dothan, which was also a port city, a party city too, if you will. And the place means two wells. And when Yosef found them, they threw him in a well. They threw him in a pit that had no water. So again, they have wells, but no water in the well. The well ran dry. There was no living water in the well. They brought their sheep to water them in a place that doesn't have water. See, the shepherds were not doing their job. They were not doing what they were supposed to be doing. We see in Ezekiel 34 some pretty good things along this line. Ezekiel 34, 1 through 15 says, the word of Adonai came to me, saying, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to those shepherds, Thus says Adonai Elohim, Oi, shepherds of Israel, who only take care of themselves. Should shepherds not take care of the sheep? You eat the fat, you clothe yourselves with the wool, you kill the fat ones, but you do not take care of the sheep. You do not strengthen the weak, heal the sick, bind up the broken, bring back the stray, or seek the lost. Instead, you have ruled over them with force and cruelty. Verse 5, they were scattered for lack of a shepherd. They became food for all the beasts of the field as they were scattered. My sheep wandered through all the mountains and on every high hill. Over all the face of the earth my sheep were scattered. No one searched, no one sought. Therefore, shepherds, hear the word of Adonai. As I live, is it a declaration of Adonai, as surely as my sheep became prey, and my sheep became food for all the beasts of the field, because there was no shepherd. Nor did my shepherds search for my flock, but the shepherds fed themselves and did not feed my sheep. Verse 9. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of Adonai. Thus says Adonai Elohim, behold, I am against the shepherds, and I will demand my flock from their hand. I will dismiss them from tending the flock. The shepherds will no longer feed themselves. I will rescue my sheep from their mouth, so they will not be food for them. For thus says Adonai Elohim, here I am. I myself will search for my sheep and seek them out. As a shepherd seeks out his sheep on the day he is among his scattered flock, so I will seek out my sheep, and I will rescue them out of the places where they have been scattered on a day of cloud and thick darkness. Verse 13, I will bring them out from the people. I will gather them from the countries. I will bring them back to their own land. I will shepherd them upon the mountains of Israel, by the streams and in all the habitable places of the land. I will shepherd them in a good pasture. Their grazing place will be on the high mountains of Israel. There they will lie down on good grazing ground. They will feed in a rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. I will tend my flock and make them lie down. It is a declaration of Adonai. Yahweh is saying, I am the good shepherd, and I will come and regather my sheep that have been scattered. Guys, when Yeshua came and he says, I am the good shepherd, this should have been the thought that people had, that what we just read. And so he says, I am the good shepherd. I'm the one who will bring in and gather the people, gather the exiles, gather those that have been scattered into all the world, and I am the one who will bring them all in. Because the shepherds were not doing their job, I myself will come and shepherd them. There are warnings given through shepherds throughout this whole thing, right? Now, not all shepherds are like this, right? But again, we have shepherds who were leading the sheep astray. And even in the course of all this too, we have prophets who are prophesying to the people things that were false. And all this going in together, people being led astray because there was not people declaring the truth. But Yahweh says he will judge the shepherds that led his people astray, and that's not a place where you want to be. Jeremiah 50 verse 6 says, my people have been lost sheep. The shepherds led them astray. Turning around in the mountains, they went from mountain to hill, and they forgot their resting place. And again, in Psalm 119, 176, he says, I have strayed like a lost sheep. Seek for your servant, for I did not forget your mitzvot. Again, we are his sheep, and though we may have been lost sheep, he is the good shepherd that will seek us out. Though we may have been led astray, he is the good shepherd that will seek us out. But we need to hear his voice to come out and follow him. So continuing about the shepherds, Isaiah 56, verse 10, 11, Israel's watchmen, all of them are blind. They don't know anything. They're all dumb dogs, unable to bark, lying there dreaming, loving to sleep, greedy dogs, never satisfied. Such are the shepherds, unable to understand. They all turn their own way, and each one intent on his own gain. Jeremiah 2:8 says, the Kohanim did not ask, where is Adonai? The Torah experts did not know me. The shepherds rebelled against me, and the prophets prophesied by Baal and went after unprofitable things. Again, there are warnings for the shepherds. Jeremiah 10:21, it says pretty blunt, the shepherds are stupid. They have not sought Adonai. Therefore, they have not acted wisely, and all their flocks are scattered. Okay, the shepherds do not scatter the flock. The shepherds need to try to keep the flock together and to gather in the flock. Jeremiah 23, 1 through 6, woe to the shepherds who are destroying and scattering the sheep of my pasture. It is a declaration of Adonai. Therefore, thus says Adonai, the God of Israel, about the shepherds who feed my people. You have scattered my flock, driven them away, and have not taken care of them. I will soon visit on you the evil of your deeds. It is a declaration of Adonai. I will gather the remnant of my flock out of all the countries where I have driven them, and I will bring them back to their folds, and they will be fruitful and multiply. Verse 4. I will raise up shepherds over them who will feed them. They will no longer be afraid or dismayed, nor will any be missing. It is a declaration of Adonai. Behold, the days are coming, declaration of Adonai, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, and he will reign as king wisely, and execute justice and righteousness in the land. In his days, Judah will be saved, and Israel will dwell in safely. And this is his name by which he will be called, Adonai our righteousness. See that? He says, I will gather in my lost sheep. I will gather in the sheep that have been led astray. I will gather them in. I will shepherd them. I will do all of this. Now, come to Matthew 15:24. Yeshua says, I was sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now, come to Luke 15 verses 4 through 6, where Yeshua says, if a man has among you and he has 100 sheep and loses one of them, will he not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one until he finds it? When he has found it, he puts on his shoulders rejoicing. When he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors and say, rejoice with me, for I found the sheep that I've lost. John 10:11, Yeshua says, I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. And in John 10:14-16, Yeshua says, I am the good shepherd. I know my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep that are not from this fold. Those also I must lead, and they will listen to my voice, and so there shall be one flock and one shepherd. See that? We have a picture of the ruler of the world who is acting like a shepherd. We have prophecy of Yahweh saying, I myself will come down there and shepherd my sheep and gather them back in. And we have Yeshua saying, I am the good shepherd. I am bringing in the lost sheep. I am gathering in those that are lost. I am the one king, the shepherd, the Almighty, the one of Israel, calling us all in to a place of covenant and learning to step into our place inside the kingdom that he wants us to live in. Pulling all the sheep together, not running away from one another, but learning to work together wherever he has us for his purposes. Because he has put us together for a remnant set for a great deliverance. All amazing things we start to see in this, guys. So that is all that I have for you today. I pray that this has been a blessing to you. I pray that's encouraged you. I pray that's challenged you as well. And if it has been a blessing to you, then please share it. Whatever avenue you listen or watch, please share them to help keep these teachings to continue to move out there. And also, if this has been a blessing to you, then please consider making a donation to help us equip us to be able to continue making these videos and getting them out there too. Okay, guys? So until next time, be blessed and be a blessing. Shalom.